Listen carefully, because the first signs that order is about to disappear don't look like chaos at all. They look normal. Too normal. The streets are still full. Shops are still open. People are still scrolling their phones, but something subtle has already shifted. And once you notice it, you can never unsee it. The biggest mistake people make before collapse isn't panic. It's assuming that tomorrow will behave like yesterday. History shows us that order doesn't collapse with explosions and sirens. It erodes quietly, then all at once. And by the time most people accept what's happening, their options are already gone. The first warning always shows up in systems, not people. When small systems start failing and no one seems rushed to fix them, that's when you should pay attention. Trash pickup becomes irregular. Street lights stay broken for weeks. Emergency response times stretch longer, but officials blame temporary shortages or logistical delays. Here's the science behind why this matters. Complex societies rely on tightly coupled systems. Power grids, water treatment, fuel delivery, policing, each one depends on the others operating on schedule. When maintenance stops being proactive and becomes reactive, you're seeing the early stages of systemic fatigue. It's not collapse yet, but it's the point where recovery becomes harder than failure. In survival terms, this is when you stop assuming services will save you and start quietly adjusting your routines, charging devices early, storing water, learning alternative routes without drawing attention to yourself. This section is based on practical field survival experience rather than formal academic sources. The second warning is behavioral, and it's chilling because it hides behind politeness. People stop correcting bad behavior. Minor thefts go unchallenged. Aggression increases, but consequences decrease. Psychologically, this happens when collective trust begins to dissolve. Humans follow rules not because rules exist, but because we believe others will also follow them. When that belief weakens, enforcement becomes selective, then symbolic, then non-existent. You'll notice it when security guards look tired instead of alert, when police cars pass disturbances without stopping, when workers say it's not worth it anymore. From a survival perspective, this is the moment you reduce visibility. You don't argue in public. You don't escalate conflicts. You don't advertise what you have. You blend. Because when order fades, attention becomes a liability. The third warning hits the supply chain, and it's one of the most misunderstood signs. Shelves don't go empty all at once. Instead, specific items vanish, then reappear, then vanish again. Medications, fuel, spare parts, baby formula. Items with complex production chains are the first to wobble. The physics behind this is simple. Just-in-time logistics leave no buffer. When transport slows or demand spikes slightly, the entire chain destabilizes. People misread this as inconvenience instead of danger. But survival science is clear. When replenishment becomes unpredictable, consumption patterns change, and that accelerates scarcity. The smart response isn't hoarding in a frenzy that attracts attention and burns social bridges. It's controlled accumulation and substitution. You learn what can be replaced, what can't, and how long you can operate without resupply. The fourth warning is informational, and it's where things get deceptive. Official messaging becomes overly reassuring, while unofficial channels explode with contradictions. Authorities say everything is under control, but they stop giving specifics. Numbers become vague. Timelines disappear. This isn't always malicious. It's often bureaucratic self-preservation, but the effect is the same. In military risk analysis, this is called narrative compression, reducing information to maintain calm. The problem is that uncertainty increases stress faster than bad news does. For survival, this is when you stop relying on a single source of truth. You cross-check. You observe reality more than statements. Is fuel actually flowing? Are people actually returning to work? Are services actually improving? Your decisions should be based on observable trends, not promises. The fifth warning is financial, and it sneaks up on people who think money equals safety. When cash limits appear, digital payments glitch, or banks quietly restrict withdrawals, you're seeing the loss of liquidity, not just currency. Economically, this signals declining institutional confidence. Systems only restrict access when they fear a run. In collapse scenarios, money doesn't become worthless overnight. It becomes unreliable. And unreliable tools are dangerous because they give false confidence. Survival strategy here means diversification. Some physical cash, yes, but also tradable skills, useful items, and social capital. People underestimate how quickly value shifts from abstract numbers to tangible utility. The sixth warning is social fragmentation, and this one feels emotional more than logical. Communities polarize. Empathy drops. Everyone blames someone else. Neuroscience explains this clearly. Prolonged stress pushes the brain into threat mode. Long-term thinking shuts down. Group identity tightens. Outsiders become risks. When you see neighbors stop helping each other and start competing, the environment has changed. Survival isn't about becoming paranoid. It's about becoming selective. You identify who is stable, who is reactive, and who is desperate. Desperation is the most dangerous force in any collapse because it ignores future consequences. The final warning is the most dangerous because it feels like relief. After weeks or months of tension, people adapt. They normalize dysfunction. Blackouts become routine. Delays feel expected. Fear turns into fatigue. This is when order truly disappears. Not when things break, but when no one expects them to work anymore. From a biological standpoint, humans can adapt to almost anything, but adaptation without resilience leads to vulnerability. This is the moment when you finalize your posture. Stay or move, hide or integrate, conserve or act. Because once dysfunction feels normal, rebuilding becomes unlikely in the short term. Here's the thing. Nobody tells you. Collapse is not an event. It's a process, and processes give warnings. The people who survive aren't the strongest or the most armed. They're the ones who notice patterns early and adjust quietly. If you wait for undeniable proof, you've already waited too long. Preparation is not panic. It's pattern recognition. When order fades, the danger isn't just outside your door. It's inside your assumptions. Most people think collapse announces itself, but what actually happens is that your internal model of reality lags behind reality itself. You keep behaving as if systems will correct themselves, as if someone is still in charge, as if consequences still function the way they used to. And that delay, that mental delay, is where people get trapped. Survival science calls this normalcy bias, and it's one of the most lethal cognitive failures in disasters. Your brain is wired to protect you from stress by pretending nothing fundamental has changed. That worked when threats were short and local. It fails catastrophically when the threat is slow, systemic, and everywhere. Once those early warnings stack up, your biology starts reacting whether you acknowledge it or not. Cortisol stays elevated, sleep quality drops, decision-making narrows. This is why people make irrational choices weeks into a crisis. Not on day one. The body is exhausted before the situation peaks. Militaries train specifically to counter this effect by building routines under stress. For civilians, the survival lesson is simpler but critical. Structure keeps you sane. Fixed times for eating, checking supplies, resting, and observing your environment reduce cognitive load. Chaos outside demands discipline inside. This section is based on practical field survival experience rather than formal academic sources. Another shift most people miss is how sound and movement change, meaning when order weakens. In stable societies, noise is background. In unstable ones, noise is information. Generators, arguments, loud music, repeated vehicle movement. All of these signal resources, stress, or vulnerability. Predatory behavior, whether criminal or desperate, follows patterns of opportunity, not morality. From a physics standpoint, sound travels farther at night and in low-activity environments. From a behavioral standpoint, people notice anomalies more when there are fewer distractions. This is why experienced survivors prioritize quiet efficiency over visible strength. Being unnoticed beats being intimidating every time. Food is another area where collapse thinking misleads people. Starvation rarely starts with empty stomachs. It starts with nutritional collapse. Diets narrow, protein drops, micronutrients disappear, energy crashes, immune systems weaken, the body becomes slower, colder, more error-prone. That's when infections turn serious and minor injuries become disabling. Survival biology is clear. Calories keep you alive short-term, but diversity keeps you functional. This is why resilient strategies focus on preservation, substitution, and low-energy cooking methods. Fire, fuel, and time all become precious. The less you need to transform food, the safer you are. As order dissolves, authority doesn't vanish, it fragments. Power shifts from institutions to individuals and small groups. This is where many people make the fatal mistake of believing rules no longer apply. In reality, rules multiply. They're just enforced locally, inconsistently, and often violently. Understanding this requires a mindset shift. You are no longer navigating law. You're navigating incentivists. What does the person in front of you want? Fear, control, resources, safety. Survival psychology teaches that most conflict can be avoided by not challenging incentives directly. You don't need to win arguments in a collapsing system. You need to exit them intact. Mobility becomes another silent dividing line between those who adapt and those who get trapped. Early on, movement feels safe. Later, it becomes dangerous. Roads turn into choke points. Fuel becomes a risk. Borders, formal or informal, appear overnight. The science here is logistical. Movement requires energy, information, and predictability. When any one of those fails, mobility turns from freedom into exposure. That's why timing matters more than distance. Leaving early looks foolish. Leaving late looks impossible. The window in between is narrow and quiet, and it closes without warning. One of the hardest truths to accept is that morality itself becomes situational under prolonged stress. This doesn't mean people become evil. It means priorities compress. The brain shifts into survival accounting. Us versus not. Us now versus later. Understanding this doesn't require abandoning ethics. It requires realism. You plan for cooperation, but you prepare for betrayal. You help when it's safe, but you don't sacrifice your viability for symbolism. This balance is uncomfortable, but discomfort is cheaper than regret. And then there's the moment most people never talk about. The point when you realize no one is coming. Not the military, not the government, not help from outside. Historically, this realization arrives unevenly. Some accept it early and adapt. Others reject it until reality forces the issue. Survival outcomes correlate strongly with acceptance speed. Once you accept the new baseline, your decisions improve dramatically. You stop waiting. You stop hoping for announcements. You act based on conditions, not expectations. If you take anything from this, let it be this. Early warnings are gifts. They're time disguised as inconvenience. Order doesn't disappear in a single night. It gives you chances to notice, adjust, and survive. Most people ignore those chances because they're subtle and socially uncomfortable to act on. But survival has never been about comfort. It's about alignment with reality.